Clara stood in her parents' attic, surrounded by dust and memories. The sun filtered through the tiny window, casting long shadows across old boxes and forgotten relics of the past. She had come to help her mother clean the house after years of neglect, but what she didn't expect was to find something that would change everything. She lifted the lid of a small wooden chest, hidden under layers of blankets. Inside, to her surprise, was a bundle of old letters, tied together with a faded ribbon. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The handwriting on the first letter was unmistakable. It was Aurora's. Her twin sister's handwriting, the sister who had disappeared 20 years ago without a trace. Clara sat down, her hands shaking slightly as she untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. As she began to read, her heart pounded in her chest. Dear Clara, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There's something I have to tell you, but I couldn't before. It's not safe. I've uncovered something dangerous, and I don't know who I can trust. I'm scared if anything happens to me, you'll understand why. Clara froze, her eyes glued to the words. Aurora had been in danger? All these years, they had believed she had run away or had been a victim of a random tragedy. But this letter hinted at something much darker. Suddenly, the attic felt smaller, the air heavier. Clara stood up quickly, her mind racing. Why had no one found these letters before? Why hadn't Aurora told her anything? Memories of their last conversation flashed through her mind. It had been just an ordinary day. They had laughed about something trivial, as sisters often do. There had been no hint of danger, no sign that Aurora was involved in anything risky. Clara carefully put the letter aside and reached for the next one. She had to know more. As she unfolded the second letter, her heart sank even further. I've seen things, Clara, things I wish I hadn't. I can't explain everything now, but there's someone watching me. I'm being followed, and I don't know what they want. Please, if something happens to me, protect Mom and Dad. Don't let them suffer because of my mistakes. Clara's hands trembled. Who was following Aurora? What had she gotten herself into? Questions flooded her mind, but there were no immediate answers. Only the certainty that Aurora had been living in fear during her final days, and no one had known. The realization hit her hard. For 2 decades, they had mourned Aurora's loss, but they had never known the truth. And now, these letters, hidden in a forgotten corner of the attic, were the only clue to what had really happened. Clara stood up, holding the letters close to her chest. She needed to show these to her mother. Maybe together they could piece together the puzzle of Aurora's disappearance. But first, Clara wanted to read more, to understand exactly what her sister had been going through. Her fingers hovered over the next letter, unsure if she was ready to know more. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back now. She had to follow the trail Aurora had left behind. Clara sat in her old bedroom, now filled with boxes from the attic. The letters were scattered across her desk, but her eyes stayed fixed on the words she had already read. Aurora's fear was palpable, and with each letter, the mystery grew deeper. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that these letters held the key to what really happened to her sister. But what if they also revealed things she wasn't ready to face? Taking a deep breath, Clara picked up the third letter. It started innocently enough, with Aurora talking about her day and some friends she had met for lunch. But halfway through, the tone shifted. I've been digging around, Clara. There's something wrong, something bigger than I thought. I don't know who to trust anymore. Even the people closest to me, they're hiding things. I'm afraid that if I push too far, I won't be able to pull back. I've already seen too much. Clara's heart raced. Aurora had always been curious, but what could she have discovered that made her so afraid? And who were the people she couldn't trust? Unable to stop herself, Clara grabbed another letter. It's getting worse. Every time I try to get closer to the truth, someone shuts me down. I think they're watching me, following my every move. I've seen the same car outside my apartment for days now. If anything happens to me, promise you'll keep digging. Don't let them cover this up." The weight of her sister's words sank deep into Clara's chest. It was clear that Aurora had uncovered something dangerous. But what? The letters were full of fear and warnings, but no specifics. Whoever Aurora was dealing with, she had been too afraid to write it down clearly, probably knowing that her letters could be found. Clara suddenly remembered their mother. She hadn't told her about the letters yet. She wasn't sure if it was the right time. What if these letters only brought more pain? But her mother deserved to know the truth, or at least as much of it as Clara had uncovered. With a sigh, Clara gathered the letters into a neat pile and headed downstairs. Her mother was in the kitchen, silently washing dishes, the weight of years of grief etched into her face. Clara hesitated in the doorway, unsure how to start. "Mom, I found something," she finally said, her voice soft. Her mother turned, wiping her hands on a towel. "What is it, Clara?" Clara held up the bundle of letters. "They're from Aurora. I found them in the attic. She was in danger, Mom. She was scared." Her mother's face paled as she slowly approached. "What do you mean? What danger?" Clara carefully placed the letters on the table and sat down. "I don't know everything yet, but she wrote about being followed. She was involved in something she couldn't talk about. She was trying to protect us." Her mother's hands trembled as she reached for one of the letters. I always hoped she was just gone, that she ran away and maybe she found a better life somewhere." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "I thought that too, but it's more complicated than we thought." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house felt unnervingly quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the truth to fully reveal itself. Clara's mother clutched the letter she had been reading, her eyes glossed over with a mixture of grief and confusion. "Do you think this is why she disappeared?" her mother whispered. "Because someone was after her?" Clara nodded slowly. "I think so. I don't know who yet, but I'm going to find out." Her mother's lips trembled. "Be careful, Clara. If she was in danger, you might be too." Clara reached out, taking her mother's hand in hers. "I'll be careful, but I have to know the truth." Her mother gave a small nod, but Clara could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't blame her. Reading the letters felt like stepping into a dark unknown. But Clara couldn't stop now. Aurora's story wasn't over, and it was up to her to uncover the ending. Clara had always known of Lucio, Aurora's close friend from college, but they had lost contact after her sister's disappearance. Now, after reading the letters, she felt compelled to track him down. He was mentioned in a few of Aurora's letters, and if anyone knew what was going on during those final days, it would be him. It didn't take long to find Lucio. A quick search on social media led Clara to a local cafe where he worked. Nervously, she walked inside, unsure of how he would react after all these years. Lucio stood behind the counter, his face worn with time but still familiar. When he saw her, his eyes widened with recognition. "Clara?" he asked, surprised. "It's been forever." "Yeah," Clara said softly, shifting awkwardly. I need to talk to you. It's about Aurora." Lucio's expression darkened. "Aurora," he repeated, his voice heavy. "I always wondered what happened to her." Clara swallowed hard. "I found letters, Lucio. Letters she wrote before she disappeared. She was scared. I think she was involved in something dangerous, and she trusted you. You were her closest friend back then. Did she tell you anything?" Lucio hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. After a moment, he motioned for Clara to follow him outside. They stepped into the alley behind the cafe, where Lucio lit a cigarette, taking a long drag before speaking. "I knew she was in trouble," he finally admitted, "but I didn't know how deep it went. She mentioned that she had found out about something bad. She was scared, and she asked me to help her figure out what to do. But then she disappeared, and I never heard from her again. Clara's heart sank. Did she say who was after her? Or what she discovered? Lucio exhaled a cloud of smoke, his face troubled. She didn't say much, but there was one name she mentioned, Umberto. I think he was involved in whatever she found. He's not someone you mess with, Clara. If she got too close to him, that could explain everything. Clara's mind raced. Umberto was a name she knew well. He had been a friend of their family for years, a respected public figure. The idea that he could be connected to Aurora's disappearance felt impossible, yet the letters and Lucio's words pointed in his direction. She was convinced someone was following her, Clara said, her voice shaking. She thought she was in danger. Lucio nodded solemnly. She was. She tried to get me involved, but I backed out. I didn't want any part of it. I thought if I stayed away, I'd be safe. But it haunts me, Clara. I should have done more. Clara felt a pang of anger rise in her chest. You could have helped her, Lucio. I know, he said quietly, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But listen, if you keep digging into this, you need to be careful. Umberto is dangerous, and if he's still covering something up, he won't hesitate to protect himself. Clara nodded, her thoughts swirling. The truth was closer than ever, but the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it seemed. Still, there was no going back now. Aurora's letters had set her on this path, and she wasn't about to stop. The name Umberto echoed in Clara's mind as she drove home. Could it really be him? The man who had been a close friend of her parents, who had been at countless family gatherings, was somehow involved in Aurora's disappearance. The thought was almost too much to process, but Lucio's warning had shaken her to the core. Once home, Clara wasted no time. She grabbed the remaining letters, looking for any mention of Umberto. After a few frantic minutes of reading, she found it. Clara, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this a secret. I've learned too much. Umberto isn't who we think he is. He's tied up in something illegal, and I've seen the proof. I'm scared, but I know I have to expose him. He's dangerous, Clara. I don't know what will happen if he finds out that I know. Clara's hands trembled as she finished the letter. It was all there, hidden in her sister's words. Aurora had been investigating something tied to Umberto, and she had paid the ultimate price for it. But the specifics still eluded Clara. What exactly had Aurora discovered? And how had Umberto managed to cover it up for so long? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, Clara quickly hid the letters under some papers and went to answer. Her mother stood in the doorway, her face pale. Clara, she said softly, stepping inside. We need to talk. Clara's heart raced. Mom, I was going to come talk to you too. There's something you need to know. Her mother sat down at the kitchen table, her expression conflicted. I've been thinking a lot about Aurora these past few days, and about what you told me. There's something I've never shared with you. Clara's stomach tightened. What is it? Her mother looked away, her eyes filled with guilt. Before Aurora disappeared, she came to me. She was frightened, but she wouldn't tell me why. She only said that she had discovered something that she couldn't handle alone. She was worried about you, about your safety. She made me promise not to tell anyone. Clara stared at her in shock. Mom, why didn't you tell me this sooner? Tears filled her mother's eyes. I thought I was protecting you. Aurora made me swear not to get you involved. And then, when she disappeared, I thought maybe she had just run away. I didn't want to believe that something worse had happened. Clara felt a wave of emotions, anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. She was in danger, and you didn't tell me? Her mother's voice broke. I didn't know what to do, Clara. I thought I was doing the right thing. Clara stood up, pacing the room as she tried to make sense of it all. Her mother had known more than she had let on. Aurora had been scared, had gone to their mother for help, and somehow Clara had been kept in the dark. It was too much to bear. "I need to figure this out," Clara said finally, her voice steady. "Aurora left these letters for a reason, and I can't stop now. Umberto was involved. She found something on him, and that's why she's gone." Her mother flinched at the name. "Umberto?" "Clara, no. He's been a friend of our family for years. He's helped us so much. There's no way he—" "I found proof," Clara interrupted, pulling one of the letters from the pile. "Aurora wrote about him. She said he was dangerous, that she knew too much. This is bigger than we ever realized." Her mother's face drained of color as she read the letter, her hands trembling. "I don't understand. How could this be true?" Clara sat down beside her, her voice softening. "I don't know the full story yet, but I'm going to find out. Aurora didn't deserve this. She was trying to protect us, and I can't let her down." Her mother nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Just be careful, Clara. Promise me you won't get too deep into this. I can't lose you too." Clara squeezed her mother's hand. "I promise, but I have to see this through." As her mother quietly left the room, Clara turned back to the letters. The weight of the truth pressed heavily on her chest, but there was no turning back now. The next step was clear. She had to confront Umberto. The decision to confront Umberto wasn't easy, but Clara knew it was the only way to uncover the truth. The idea of facing him, someone who had been so close to her family, filled her with dread. But after reading Aurora's final letters, Clara couldn't wait any longer. She had to confront him and force the truth out of him, no matter the risk. The next day, Clara drove to Umberto's estate, her heart pounding the entire way. The sprawling mansion felt cold and unwelcoming as she pulled into the long driveway. Memories of past family gatherings flashed through her mind. Umberto's laugh, his kind words to her parents. But now, everything about him felt wrong. Dark. Clara took a deep breath as she stepped out of the car, clutching the letters in her bag. She had no idea how he would react, but she had to be ready for anything. As she walked up to the door and rang the bell, her pulse quickened. There was no turning back. Moments later, Umberto opened the door, surprised to see her. "Clara, what a surprise," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "What brings you here?" Clara forced a smile, masking the fear swirling inside her. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Umberto stepped aside, letting her in. The interior of his house was just as grand as she remembered, but now it felt suffocating. As they sat down in the living room, Clara's eyes scanned the room, looking for any signs that might give away the man he truly was. But everything appeared normal, too normal. "So, what's this about?" Umberto asked, leaning back in his chair, still maintaining the air of a family friend. Clara pulled one of the letters from her bag and handed it to him. "It's about Aurora. I found these letters she wrote before she disappeared. They talk about you." Umberto's expression hardened as he glanced down at the letter. For a moment, his calm demeanor faltered, and Clara saw something dark flicker behind his eyes. He quickly regained his composure, setting the letter aside without reading it fully. "I'm not sure what you think you found, Clara, but this is ridiculous," he said, his voice low and controlled. Aurora, she was troubled. She had her own issues. Whatever she wrote in those letters, it doesn't mean anything. Clara's jaw clenched. "She was scared of you, Umberto. She wrote that you were involved in something illegal, something dangerous. And now she's gone, and no one knows what happened to her. You're telling me that's a coincidence?" Umberto's gaze turned cold. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Clara. You have no idea what you're talking about." "I know enough," Clara shot back, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Aurora was investigating something about you, and she was afraid for her life. She was being followed, and she mentioned your name more than once. What were you involved in, Umberto? What did you do to her? Umberto stood up abruptly, towering over her. You need to stop this, Clara. Whatever Aurora thought she knew, she was wrong. And you're going to get yourself hurt if you keep pushing. Clara stood too, refusing to back down. I'm not going to stop. Aurora deserves the truth, and I'm going to find it, whether you help me or not. For a long, tense moment, Umberto said nothing. The air between them crackled with unspoken threats, and Clara could feel her heart hammering in her chest. But she didn't waver. She had come too far to back down now. Finally, Umberto sighed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his secrets was too heavy to carry any longer. You don't understand, Clara. This isn't just about me. It's bigger than you realize. If Aurora hadn't gotten involved, she would still be here. Clara's blood ran cold. So, you are involved. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything, Umberto snapped. But she wouldn't listen. She kept digging, asking questions she shouldn't have. She got too close to the wrong people, and they made sure she wouldn't talk. Clara felt a wave of nausea. Who are they? Who's responsible for her disappearance? Umberto shook his head. I can't tell you that. It's not safe. If you keep going down this path, they'll come after you too. Clara clenched her fists. I don't care. I deserve to know the truth. Umberto's eyes softened slightly, but there was still a dangerous edge to his voice. I'm warning you, Clara. Walk away. Forget about Aurora. Forget about the letters. It's the only way you'll stay safe. Clara shook her head. I'm not walking away. I'll find out what happened to her, with or without your help. Umberto stared at her for a long moment, then finally nodded, his expression grim. Then you're on your own. Clara turned and walked out of the house, her heart pounding in her chest. She had gotten some answers, but they only raised more questions. Whoever had been behind Aurora's disappearance was still out there, and now Clara was in their sights. But no matter the danger, she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the full truth. Clara left Umberto's estate shaken, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She had the pieces of the puzzle, but she still didn't know who the real enemy was. Umberto's warning echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about him. There were others involved, people powerful enough to make Aurora disappear. And now they were watching her, too. The next morning, Clara received an unexpected call. It was Lucio. Clara, we need to meet, he said, his voice tense. There's something I didn't tell you before. It's about Aurora and Umberto. Clara agreed, and they met at a park far from prying eyes. Lucio looked nervous, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a sense of urgency. I've been thinking about our last conversation, he began, pacing back and forth. About Umberto. I was scared before, but now I realize that I can't keep this to myself anymore. What is it? Clara asked, her heart pounding. Lucio stopped and looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. Aurora found something. Something that tied Umberto to a much bigger operation. Illegal investments, money laundering, stuff way beyond anything we could have imagined. But that's not all. Clara listened intently, her stomach tightening with each word. Before she disappeared, Aurora gave me a key. Lucio continued, pulling a small, tarnished key from his pocket. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, I was to give it to someone she trusted. That's you, Clara. Clara took the key, her fingers trembling. What is this open? Lucio shook his head. I don't know exactly, but I think it's for a storage unit. Aurora was paranoid those last few weeks, and she started hiding things. She told me it was safer that way. Whatever she found, it's in that unit. Clara's mind raced. This could be the final piece of the puzzle. Do you know where the storage unit is? Yes, Lucio said. I've been too afraid to go, but I'll take you. They drove in silence to the outskirts of the city, where the storage facility stood. The rows of units were nondescript, and the air was thick with tension as Clara and Lucio approached the door that matched the key. Clara's hands shook as she inserted the key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit space. Inside, there were boxes piled neatly along the walls. Clara and Lucio exchanged a nervous glance before stepping inside. Clara began rifling through the boxes, her breath quickening as she unearthed files, photos, and documents. Each one painted a chilling picture of corruption, criminal activity, and connections that led straight to Umberto and others she didn't recognize. But then Clara found something that made her blood run cold. Photos of Aurora, taken without her knowledge. Aurora walking down the street, Aurora sitting in a cafe, Aurora entering her apartment. She had been followed.
Stalked.
"There's more," Lucio said, his voice shaking as he held up a folder labeled Black Rose. Clara took the folder and opened it. Inside were detailed accounts of Umberto's illegal dealings, all tied to an underground organization known as Black Rose. Aurora had stumbled upon their operations and had been gathering evidence to take them down. That's why they had silenced her. Clara's hands trembled as she realized the full scope of the danger Aurora had been in, and now she was in the same position. "They knew," Clara whispered. "They knew she was going to expose them. That's why they made her disappear." Lucio nodded grimly. "And now they're going to come after you too." Clara stood up, her heart racing. "We have to go to the police. This is enough to bring them down." Before Lucio could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the storage unit. Clara froze. Someone was coming. "We need to leave, now," Lucio hissed, grabbing Clara's arm. They quickly shoved the documents back into the boxes and rushed out of the unit. But as they stepped into the parking lot, two men in dark suits were waiting for them. Clara recognized one of them from the photos in the storage unit. Black Rose. "Stay calm," Lucio whispered, but Clara could see the fear in his eyes. One of the men stepped forward, his voice cold and menacing. "You've found something you shouldn't have, Mississippi. You're going to come with us." Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I know what you've done. I know about Umberto, and I know about Black Rose. It's over." The man's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." But before they could make a move, the sound of sirens filled the air. Clara's heart leaped with relief as police cars swarmed the parking lot. Lucio had called them earlier, just in case things went wrong. The men tried to flee, but the officers quickly apprehended them. As Clara watched the scene unfold, a wave of emotions washed over her. Fear, relief, and an overwhelming sense of sadness. The truth was out, but it had come at a high cost. Aurora had lost her life trying to expose these people, and now Clara had brought them to justice. But as she stood there, holding the key that had unlocked the truth, she knew that this wasn't just Aurora's victory. It was her own. She had fought for her sister, and now she could finally let her rest in peace.